Usually when we talk about a country that is just an absolute titan of the global economy, we have a very specific, almost cinematic image in our heads.
Oh, totally. We definitely do.
Right. Like, think about what success looks like in most of the developed world for you listening.
Mhm.
We picture skyscrapers with the lights blazing at like 11 p.m. because the analysts are still running numbers.
Yeah, the classic hustle.
Exactly. We picture commuter trains packed shoulder to shoulder with exhausted people in suits, uh, drinking their third coffee before the sun even comes up. We just picture this sheer grinding hustle.
Right, because the baseline assumption is that maximum national output requires maximum individual hours worked.
Yeah.
It's the defining equation of modern industrial capitalism.
Yeah.
Immense national wealth is inextricably linked to immense individual exertion. We've just been conditioned to believe that if a country is generating nearly $1 trillion in economic value, the citizens of that country must be working themselves to the bone to produce it.
But then you look at the reality of the Netherlands, and that entire equation just completely shatters.
It really does.
So today we are bringing you a deep dive into what is frankly a mind-bending contradiction. We are looking at a country that boasts a gross domestic product of over $920 billion.
Which is massive.
I mean, let that number sink in. That is a colossal economic engine. Yet globally, this exact same country is widely considered the part-time capital of the world.
Yeah, it's one of the most stunning paradoxes in global economics. When we pull back the layers on the labor statistics here,
Yeah.
the numbers are almost hard to believe for anyone accustomed to the standard 40-hour grind.
Oh, for sure. Give us the numbers.
So an astounding 77.46% of the female workforce in the Netherlands is engaged in part-time labor.
77%.
Yeah, and it is absolutely not just women. If you look at the overall workforce encompassing every demographic, 62.16% of all workers are part-time.
Over 62%. Well over half the country is effectively working a shortened week. So our mission for you today is to decode this. We have our hands on a fantastic, highly rigorous 15-part academic data report that breaks down the macroeconomic and social development of the Netherlands.
And the researchers actually call this the miracle of balance.
The miracle of balance.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's exactly what we want to figure out. How on earth does a society achieve world-class income, phenomenal social development, and a near $1 trillion GDP when the vast majority of its people are, clocking out on Thursday afternoon or just working shortened days?
Well, to really understand this, we have to throw out the superficial metrics.
Right.
You can't just look at the headline GDP in a labor chart and make sense of it. The research provides a really elegant framework for understanding how a country can be ostensibly relaxed yet economically dominant.
So what's the framework?
We have to look at the underlying architecture. So their macroeconomics and trade strategy, their deep investments in human capital, their massive pivot to technology and services, and finally, their energy transition.
Got it.
It's the invisible interaction between these specific pillars that actually allows this part-time culture to exist without, collapsing the economy entirely.
Right, because you don't just magically declare a 3-day weekend for everyone without a massive economic engine running flawlessly in the background to pay for it.
Exactly. You have to build the machine first.
So let's pop the hood on that machine.
Yeah.
The foundation of this entire lifestyle seems to be built on an incredibly resilient macroeconomic bottom line.
It is, and the historical view here is crucial. If we track their gross domestic product in constant 2015 US dollars.
Which strips out the noise of inflation, right?
Right. It gives us a true measure of actual economic growth. The trajectory from 1960 to today is remarkably smooth. Back in 1960, you're looking at a GDP of about $16.5 billion.
Yep.
Today, it's sitting at roughly $920 billion.
That is a staggering multiplier over just a few decades.
It is, but what economists find more impressive than the sheer climb is the stability of that climb.
What do you mean by stability?
Well, think about the global shocks we've endured since 1960. The oil crises of the 70s, the dot-com bubble burst, the 2008 global financial crisis, a global pandemic.
Right, massive disruptions.
In almost every single instance, the Dutch economy shows a relatively minor dip, followed by a rapid, aggressive bounce back.
Wow.
And the fuel for this unrelenting engine, it's their intense, almost unparalleled integration into global trade. The Netherlands is the quintessential small open economy.
Okay, I want to stop right there and push back a little.
Here.
When you say trade, we aren't just talking about a country that exports some Gouda cheese and a few million tulips every spring, right?
Yeah.
Because that doesn't get you to $920 billion.
Not even close. Goods and services exports account for an overwhelming share of their GDP. Historically, the numbers show this export figure reaching peaks well over 70% of their entire economic output.
Wait, 70%?
Yeah. To put that in perspective for you, a massive self-contained economy like the United States might see exports hovering around, say, 10 to 15% of its GDP.
Oh, wow, okay.
The Netherlands operates on a completely different paradigm. They are fundamentally wired into the global supply chain.
But wait, isn't that incredibly dangerous?
How so?
Well, if 70% of your entire economy relies on what other countries are buying, selling, and moving, doesn't that make you the most fragile country on Earth? Like, if global trade sneezes, shouldn't the Netherlands end up in the ICU?
That is the logical assumption, and it's a debate economists have constantly. But the reality of hyper-open economies operates counterintuitively.
Okay.
Yes, they are highly exposed to global fluctuations by definition, but their extreme integration actually creates a unique kind of structural armor.
Structural armor. How does relying on other people give you armor?
Because they aren't just selling products to a single buyer, they are the logistical and financial clearinghouse for a massive portion of the world.
Ah,
Think about the port of Rotterdam, which is the largest seaport in Europe. Think about their massive financial and logistics networks, their physical and digital infrastructure. They process trade for everyone.
right. They're the middleman.
Exactly. They are moving German cars, French luxury goods, American technology. They aren't reliant on a single domestic industry that can go obsolete or a single trade partner that can experience a localized recession.
I see. So it's the difference between being a single spoke on a wheel versus being the actual hub holding the spokes together. If one spoke breaks, the hub still spins.
Precisely. Their indispensability acts as a buffer. They are so vital to the movement of global capital and physical goods that the broader European and honestly global economy effectively ensures their system keeps moving.
Because everyone else needs them to keep moving.
Right. They process the volume of the world. And taking a tiny fraction of a massive global volume generates incredible consistent wealth.
Okay, I buy that. They built the ultimate toll booth and routing center for global commerce.
Yeah.
But a global trade hub of that magnitude is completely useless without the right people running it. I mean, you don't manage complex derivative markets, automated port logistics, and international trade law with an uneducated workforce.
No, you definitely don't.
The cranes don't program themselves, and the contracts don't write themselves.
Ah.
Which brings us to what feels like the real secret weapon here: how they build their citizens.
This is exactly where the part-time model starts to make mathematical sense. We have to look at their human capital.
Right.
It begins with educational statistics that are frankly staggering, and it starts at the very beginning of a citizen's life. Primary school net enrollment is essentially universal. It consistently hovers around 99%.
Which is great, obviously.
Yeah.
But let's be real, a lot of developed high-income countries have near 100% primary school enrollment. Just having kids in a building doesn't explain a trillion-dollar part-time economy.
You're absolutely right, and the researchers anticipate that exact critique. Enrollment just measures attendance.
Right.
The truly critical metric we need to look at is the learning poverty rate.
Learning poverty. Break that down for us. What does that mean?
Learning poverty measures the percentage of children who fall below the absolute minimum reading proficiency standard by the end of primary school. So it's a measure of actual cognitive acquisition, not just seat time. In the Netherlands, that learning poverty rate is a minuscule 1.73%.
Wow. Only 1.73% of children are falling behind basic proficiency.
Exactly. When you think about the socioeconomic variables in any population like learning disabilities, language barriers for immigrants, poverty keeping that number under 2% is a monumental societal achievement.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It indicates that the foundational quality of the education is not just high, but exceptionally equitable across all demographics.
So what are the compounding effects of that? If you virtually eradicate learning poverty at age 10, what does that workforce look like 20 years later?
Well, it translates directly into a massive, structurally sound higher education boom.
Okay.
Because almost 0% of the population lacks critical comprehension skills early on, the pipeline to advanced degrees is just wide open.
Makes sense.
The researchers found a steady, unyielding climb in tertiary education. When you look at the population aged 25 and older, 36.55% hold at least a bachelor's degree or the equivalent.
That's huge.
And total higher education enrollment has skyrocketed to near 80%.
And there is a specific demographic trend within that higher education boom
Yeah.
that seems like kind of the smoking gun for our part-time paradox, the female higher education attainment curve.
It is the defining curve. The rate of women achieving tertiary education has shot upward, hitting nearly 36%.
Okay, so
And you have to connect that specific number to the 77.46% female part-time labor rate we discussed at the very beginning. You're looking at a massive cohort of highly educated, highly specialized female workers entering the market.
okay, I think I'm getting it. Think about it like upgrading a computer's processor.
I like this analogy.
If you are running an old, inefficient processor, you might have to leave your computer running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just to slowly render a video file.
Right.
But if you install a super fast, highly efficient, top-of-the-line CPU, it renders that exact same video file in a single hour. You don't need to leave the machine running all night.
Yeah.
The Dutch have essentially upgraded their human processors across the entire population. They've substituted the brute force of sheer hours worked with incredibly high-quality, high-value output per hour.
That is a highly accurate way to look at the mechanics of a knowledge economy. This high educational baseline entirely justifies the part-time model from an economic standpoint.
Because they can do more in less time.
Yes. In a service and knowledge-based economy, value is not created by the physical endurance of sitting at a desk for 8 hours. Value is created by complex problem-solving, innovation, software architecture, and strategic decision-making.
Right.
High absolute output per unit of time completely compensates for the lower absolute number of hours worked.
So an engineer, a legal consultant, or a financial analyst working 28 hours a week can mathematically generate far more economic value for the GDP than an unskilled laborer working 60 hours a week.
Precisely. And the Dutch system recognizes this reality. It allows the individual to capture the surplus value of their high education in the form of free time, rather than just forcing them to stay in the office to produce marginal extra profits for a corporation.
But hold on, let's play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
If you have this incredibly powerful, highly educated workforce,
Yeah.
why not just work them 40 or 50 hours a week anyway? I mean, imagine the GDP then.
Yeah, the classic capitalist question.
Right. If they are generating $920 billion on part-time hours, they could be a $2 trillion economy if everyone just worked a standard American or Japanese work week. Aren't they leaving money on the table?
It's a classic macroeconomic question, but it assumes that human cognitive output scales linearly with time, which it absolutely does not.
What do you mean?
Well, the law of diminishing returns hits knowledge workers incredibly hard. You might write brilliant code for 4 hours, but by hour 9, you are introducing bugs that will take you 3 hours to fix the next day.
Oh, that is so true.
The Dutch model posits that forced extended hours in a high-skill economy actually destroy value through burnout, health crises, and decreased civic participation. They aren't leaving money on the table. They are optimizing for sustainable long-term yield rather than short-term extraction.
That makes a ton of sense. You can't sprint a marathon.
Exactly.
But that leads us to a massive structural question. We have this highly educated population working fewer hours, but what exactly are they doing during those 25 or 30 hours a week?
Good question.
Because you certainly can't run a 19th century factory assembly line on a flexible part-time schedule. The conveyor belt doesn't stop just because it's your Tuesday to take the kids to the park.
You've hit on the exact structural prerequisite for this entire society. You can only have a part-time economy if your industrial composition allows for it.
Right.
You cannot build this model on heavy manufacturing or resource extraction. The data shows us exactly what the Dutch are doing, and it is overwhelmingly focused on advanced tech and modern services.
Let's look at the tech side first. Because they aren't just a service economy, they make incredibly complex physical things.
They do. When we look at their manufacturing sector, high-tech exports comprise a massive 20 to 30% of all manufactured exports.
So we are talking about aerospace components, specialized pharmaceuticals, advanced scientific instruments, and famously, the semiconductor manufacturing equipment that essentially runs the modern world.
Exactly. High-value, low-volume manufacturing. And underpinning that high-tech manufacturing and the society as a whole is a digital infrastructure that is almost unparalleled globally.
I saw this in the report, the internet usage numbers.
Yes. The researchers point out an astounding statistic. 97% of the entire population is using the internet.
97%. That is effectively absolute saturation.
Yeah, pretty much everyone.
Everyone from a primary school student to an 85-year-old grandparent is digitally integrated.
It means the transaction costs of daily life and daily business are nearly zero. Information moves instantly. And when you combine that 97% digital penetration with the near 40% higher education rates we discussed, you witness a fundamental restructuring of the economy toward modern services.
And this is where the numbers get truly massive. The researchers calculate that the service sector now accounts for colossal $656.6 billion in value added to the economy.
It is absolute dominance. The third sector services is the undisputed engine of the Dutch economy. It dwarfs agriculture and traditional manufacturing.
And for you listening, this is the crucial unlock. This is why the part-time dream is actually functional. Think about the fundamental nature of service work compared to industrial work.
Right.
You cannot run a steel mill, a deep shaft coal mine, or a traditional automotive plant on 15-hour or 25-hour flexible work weeks.
No, absolutely not.
The massive capital equipment, the blast furnaces, the presses, they require continuous synchronized human presence to be profitable. If the 2 p.m. shift decides to go part-time, the factory loses millions.
The physical infrastructure dictates the human schedule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can run an IT consulting firm, a digital marketing agency, a financial clearinghouse, or a high-tech design bureau that way.
Yes.
Service sector jobs, especially heavily digitized ones, are inherently modular. You can share a legal caseload with a partner. You can hand off a software development sprint to a colleague. You could do a massive client meeting on a Tuesday, write the strategic brief on Wednesday morning, and completely log off by Thursday afternoon. The work is asynchronous.
That modularity is everything. The service-dominant economy provides the exact structural soil required for a part-time culture to flourish.
Yeah.
And because these are highly specialized, high-value services, the productivity per hour remains incredibly high. The omnipresent digital infrastructure enables the high-tech exports, and the transition away from heavy, inflexible industry toward knowledge-based services means you aren't sacrificing national productivity by letting people reclaim their time.
It's a beautiful system. They've figured out how to generate immense national wealth without breaking the back of the individual citizen. They use tech to export high-value goods, they use services to keep the economy flexible, and they use education to make sure every hour worked is incredibly potent.
It is.
But, yeah, there is always a but in macroeconomics.
There is.
And this brings us to a really crucial pivot in our deep dive. We've solved the mystery of how they make the money and how they structure the labor. Now we have to look at how they spend that money on their citizens, and more importantly, the massive, slow-moving demographic storm that threatens to tear this incredibly delicate balance apart.
It is the existential threat to the miracle of balance. But before we look at the threat, we have to acknowledge what is currently at stake.
Okay.
The researchers highlight the undeniable success of the Dutch model in translating sheer economic wealth into actual, tangible human well-being. It's one thing to have a high GDP. It's another to actually keep your citizens alive and healthy.
And the classic proxy for measuring that translation is infant mortality.
It's widely considered the most reliable indicator of a nation's overall structural health because it requires everything to work right. Sanitation, prenatal care, hospital infrastructure, maternal leave, and general societal wealth.
The historical contrast here in the report is striking. In 1960, the infant mortality rate in the Netherlands was in the double digits.
Right.
But today, the data shows a dramatic cliff-like drop down to under 3.6 per 1,000 live births.
That drop is the hallmark of a mature, highly efficient, heavily funded healthcare system. You don't get infant mortality under 4 per 1,000 without phenomenal universal health access and exceptionally high living standards.
Yeah.
The part-time model hasn't just provided leisure time. The massive tax base generated by their high productivity economy fully funds a world-class cradle-to-grave welfare state.
But here comes the friction.
Yes.
The researchers introduced the demographic shift happening right now, and it looks like a math problem that cannot be solved without someone getting hurt.
It really does.
The population pyramid is rapidly becoming top-heavy. They point out that there are already over 1.4 million females, aged 65 and older, and the male elderly population is growing right in tandem.
The graying of the population. It is the friction point that every developed nation is facing. But it is acutely dangerous for the Netherlands.
Let's break down why it's so dangerous. If you're listening to this, I want you to really ponder the math of this scenario.
It's tough math.
If the vast majority of your active workforce is already working part-time, say 25 to 30 hours a week, and suddenly a massive chunk of that workforce ages out and retires entirely,
Hmm.
who is going to pay the taxes to keep that world-class healthcare system running?
Exactly.
The elderly require exponentially more medical and social care than the young. So you have a shrinking pool of active working hours being taxed to support a massively growing demographic of retirees who need really expensive care.
The math gets very grim very quickly. Economists call this the dependency ratio.
So the dependency ratio is essentially measuring how many people are riding in the cart versus how many people are pulling the cart.
That's a great way to visualize it. It's the number of non-working older people compared to the working age population. In a healthy, growing demographic, you might have 3 or 4 full-time workers generating taxes to support one retiree.
The cart is light, and there are a lot of people pulling.
Right. But if everyone is only pulling the cart part-time, and suddenly half the pullers jump into the cart stops moving.
Oh, wow.
The entire Dutch model, this beautiful equilibrium of high part-time work, high output, and incredible social welfare, relies on incredibly high per capita tax revenue from the active workforce to fund it all. When the dependency ratio shifts too far in the wrong direction, the government faces a brutal trilemma.
What are the three options?
Option 1, you drastically cut social benefits and healthcare, which degrades the quality of life they've spent 60 years building.
Nobody wants that.
No. Option 2, you massively raise taxes on the working young, which stifles economic growth and creates huge generational resentment.
Also bad.
Yeah.
Or option 3, the one that destroys the whole premise of this deep dive. You force everyone back to a 40-hour work week to generate more raw tax revenue.
Precisely. You ask people to work more hours, which threatens the very miracle of balance we were discussing. Their current extreme efficiency is going to be severely stress-tested by this demographic reality.
Wow.
Can a part-time economy generate enough surplus to care for a massive elderly population? We are going to find out in the next decade.
It's a looming crisis. If the societal processor is super fast, but suddenly you have half as many processors trying to run twice as many heavy programs, the entire system is going to lag and overheat.
That's exactly it.
But amazingly, demographics isn't the only historical debt the Netherlands has to pay off. There's an ecological debt, too.
Yes, and any honest macroeconomic analysis has to factor in the environmental cost of wealth generation. Building a trillion-dollar economic engine, becoming the logistical hub of the entire planet, doesn't happen by accident, and it certainly doesn't happen cleanly.
We have to be totally impartial here. Building a wealthy, highly educated, hyper-connected society took a staggering amount of cheap, dirty energy. You don't become the central nervous system of global trade using windmills. Well, I mean, modern windmills anyway.
The researchers don't shy away from this at all. Historically, the Netherlands relied on fossil fuels for over 95% of its total energy consumption. They were burning coal, oil, and massive amounts of natural gas to power those ports, those high-tech manufacturing plants, and those server farms.
As a massive industrial and logistical hub, their carbon footprint was immense. The research shows their total CO2 emissions hitting a peak of over 170 million tons.
170 million tons for a geographically tiny nation. They were punching way above their weight in carbon emissions. It was the necessary fuel for their rapid post-war growth.
So they basically cheated. They built this beautiful, part-time utopian society by just burning massive amounts of fossil fuels and passing the environmental bill to the next generation.
It's a valid critique, and it's the exact critique leveled at almost every early industrialized nation. However, what makes the current Dutch situation fascinating is the speed and aggression of their recent turnaround.
Right.
They realized the ecological debt was coming due, and the recent data shows a very dramatic pivot.
Yeah, the transition data here is wild. The share of electricity generated from renewable sources has skyrocketed. It followed this incredible exponential curve, moving from under 2% to an impressive 33.12% in recent years.
Going from under 2% to over 33% renewable energy for a heavily industrialized, heavily digitized trade hub is a massive structural achievement.
That is a huge jump.
It is. It requires redesigning the grid, incentivizing offshore wind, and fundamentally changing how energy is priced and distributed.
And this is where the researchers introduce a specific economic concept that I found absolutely fascinating. It's an attempt to measure if a country is actually successful or if it's just burning its furniture to stay warm.
Adjusted net savings.
Yes, adjusted net savings. Walk us through what this actually measures, because it feels like the ultimate proof of concept for whether the Dutch model is real or a mirage.
I'd be glad to, because it's a revolutionary way of looking at macroeconomics. Traditionally, we just look at gross domestic product, or GDP, but GDP is a deeply flawed metric for long-term health.
Because it just measures transactions.
Exactly. GDP just tells you how much money changed hands in a given year. If a country clear cuts its entire ancient forest and sells the timber, its GDP spikes massively that year.
But the country is actually poorer because the forest is gone forever.
Exactly. GDP doesn't tell you if you are building sustainable wealth or destroying your underlying assets. That's where adjusted net savings, or ANS, comes in. ANS takes the gross national income, and then it starts making very strict mathematical adjustments.
Like an audit of the country's soul.
A financial audit of its future? Yes. First, it deducts the depreciation of physical infrastructure, roads wearing out, bridges aging. Then, crucially, it deducts the depletion of natural resources.
So if you use it up, you lose it on the balance sheet.
Right. If you pump $1 billion of natural gas out of the ground, ANS subtracts that from your wealth because that asset is gone.
Okay, makes sense. What about the pollution?
It deducts that too. It attempts to calculate the estimated monetary damage caused by your carbon emissions and subtracts it from your national balance sheet.
So it mathematically punishes you for ruining the environment and draining your natural resources. It forces a country to internalize the cost of its wealth.
Precisely. But then it does something really interesting on the positive side. It adds a country's investments in education back into the ledger.
Oh, wow.
It treats human capital, the brains of the citizens, as a tangible, accumulating national asset, just like a factory or a gold mine.
Okay, so you run the Dutch economy through this brutal audit.
Yeah.
You penalize them for the 170 million tons of historical carbon. You penalize them for pumping out the Groningen gas field. You add in their massive spending on getting learning poverty down to 1.73% and getting higher education up to nearly 40%. What is the final score?
Even when factoring in the heavy historical costs of their carbon emissions and natural resource depletion, the Netherlands maintains a consistently positive adjusted net savings of between 13% and 17% of their gross national income.
I want to make sure I'm getting this. Even when you rigorously penalize them mathematically for their carbon footprint and resource use, they're still coming out massively ahead by 13 to 17% every year.
They are. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of our entire deep dive, this is the ultimate validation. It proves that Dutch wealth and the part-time lifestyle it buys is not a mirage.
It's real wealth.
Yes, it is not a Ponzi scheme built purely on borrowing from the future or irreparably ravaging the environment. They are genuinely accumulating sustainable national wealth.
Because the value of their highly educated human capital vastly outweighs the cost of the carbon they burn to get there.
Exactly. Now, the green transition they are undergoing to get to that 33% renewable mark is expensive and economically painful in the short term. But the adjusted net savings data strongly suggests they have hit the inflection point. They are executing the green pivot while keeping the national balance sheet solidly, sustainably in the green.
So bringing all these massive disparate data points together, from the $920 billion GDP to the 1.73% learning poverty, from the 97% internet use to the aging population and the green energy pivot. What is the final verdict on this socioeconomic puzzle? How do we sum up the miracle of balance?
Let's synthesize everything we've uncovered. We return to the very first question we asked. Why doesn't a workforce where 62% of people are working part-time completely collapse the national economy?
Right. How do they actually pull this off?
Think about the Dutch economy as a tripod. A tripod is incredibly stable, but it requires all three legs to be perfectly structurally sound. If you remove even one leg, the entire thing crashes to the floor.
Okay, I'm picturing the tripod. What is leg number one?
Leg one is ultra-high human capital. This is the foundation. It's the near-zero learning poverty, the massive higher education attainment, and the empowerment of the female workforce.
Yeah.
You have brilliant, highly capable people maximizing the value of every thought they have.
Got it. Leg two.
Leg two is deep technological integration. This is the 97% internet penetration and the dominance in high-tech manufacturing exports. The tools they are using are the most advanced on the planet, meaning the friction of doing business is almost zero.
And leg three.
Leg three is extreme global trade openness and service sector reliance. This is their position as the hub of global logistics, combined with a $656 billion service economy. The service structure is what physically allows for the flexibility of part-time work, while the trade openness ensures constant, massive revenue streams from the rest of the world.
The tripod. Education, technology, and open service trade.
Exactly. When those three legs stand together, they support the Dutch paradox. They use the education and the technology to maximize the economic value of every single hour worked within that flexible service sector. It allows citizens to step away from the desk, go home, and reclaim their time without bankrupting the nation.
The synergy of those three elements literally replaces the brute force of the traditional 40-plus hour work week. They've automated the grunt work, outsourced the heavy industry, and hyper-educated the populace to do the high-value thinking.
It is a masterclass in macroeconomic structuring.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you are running a small business, managing a corporate team, or just thinking about your own career trajectory, the major takeaway here is profound.
It really is.
Labor duration, just tracking how many hours you or your employees sit in an office chair, is a fundamentally poor, outdated metric for economic health. Productivity, deep continuous education, and structural infrastructure are what actually matter. You can have a thriving, highly profitable system that values human time over endless labor, but you have to build the machine correctly first. You need the tripod.
Perfectly stated. Though, as we must acknowledge based on the rigorous data we just explored, this specific machine requires constant, vigilant maintenance.
Right, the demographic storm.
Moving forward, the Netherlands faces two massive grinding frictions. They have to navigate an aging, top-heavy population that will severely strain their tax base, and they have to execute a full 100% energy transition to renewables without stalling that vital economic engine. It will be the defining test of a generation.
It certainly will be. Well, thank you for guiding us through this incredibly dense, fascinating set of data. Breaking down that tripod completely changed how I look at productivity and what is actually possible for a society.
It was a pleasure to unpack it. The numbers tell a truly remarkable story about the value of time.
Before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over on your own. We just spent an hour dissecting how the Netherlands used early digital technology and mass education to buy back their time and build a part-time utopia. Now look at the horizon. As artificial intelligence begins to fundamentally automate the global service sector, from writing code to legal consulting to basic administration, productivity per hour is about to skyrocket worldwide.
It's going to change everything.
The question is, what are we going to do with it? Will other nations use that massive AI productivity boost to adopt the Dutch model, allowing us all to live a part-time, highly balanced life? Or will we simply move the goalposts, keep working our 40, 50, or 60 hours a week, and chase an ever higher abstract GDP while the machines do the heavy lifting? Think about what you would do with your time if the machine was built right. Keep digging deep, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.